Just just before starting discussing a little bit about my artistic work, I would like to make a little emphasis and appreciation to everything that just Maria Jose shared with us, but also how you make this like remark about our context and how this is so important for the work that we are doing. Because sometimes you can think, for example, in our case, that the dictatorship was something that happens like many, many years ago, but it's not like that. It's something that is very present until this day in our lives. And of course, it is absolutely related with our works. You know, it's not only doing an exercise of memory, of remembering. No, it's like something that we have this feeling that is still happening. For example, regarding what Marcela was saying in the beginning, the laws. In Chile, our laws, our constitution is still the one that was made during the dictatorship. And that, of course, is a very big influence in how we relate socially, culturally, politically, economically, etc. So, yes, I think it's very important to do that, make a little emphasis on that, because I think it will also help you to understand why we insist in these topics and in these subjects so much, from different points of view, of course. But still, it's something that is very present. I'm from another generation. I was born in the year 88. I was born in exile because my parents actually were political refugees. So my story is also very related to the dictatorship, even if it is with everyone, you know, because it was something of everyday life. And I think that when all these stories that we share in the end from different points of view and with different experiences, without a doubt, it has taken us into this path of performance. Because also, for example, in the context of dictatorship, of course, there was many artists doing some performances, like the Cada Colectivo, for example. And it was this idea of how can we resist from our bodies when it's actually bodies that are being tortured, killed, and disappeared, you know? How we can appear from our bodies when actually it's that like materiality, you know, it's bodies that are being the subjects of all these violences. So I think that this is very important to say, because it shows us how there is definitely a political decision when we decide to do this activism through performance art and through our bodies. As an introduction. So now, the collective. I've been working in different things while Marcela was reading our like bios and stuff. You can see that we do many things, you know, like people who likes a lot of things and do many things. Because also in our context, it's very hard to survive, basically, from many points of view. So sometimes, yes, and also we have these different interests and different approaches to activism, I think. For example, for me and the educational places, like being a scholar, being a professor, is very important, and define who I am also. I am an artist, I am an activist, but I am also a professor, you know. And I think that in these instances of dialogues, even in institutionalized places, is where we also need to like put barriers, you know, like try to move these structures that are very patriarchal, very capitalist, and very colonial also. We come from the end of the world, you know, like from the last country over there, very far away. So yes, this is something that's very present in our reflections, in our decisions of also how we're going to conduct these different types of political activation through different tools. And for example, education for us, like educational spaces, are a place also for doing this. Yes. Then the artistic activist sphere, from the year 2018, I'm going to show you a little slide. I've been working with this collective that is called LASTESIS. One moment, please. I'm sorry. I know. There. Voilà. That is a feminist and activist collective, that an artistic collective that we found like foundation, not like the fund, that we created in the year 2018. We started working in that year, but we had this idea from many years before, but it wasn't possible because of the conditions of our lives. Like we didn't have the time to do this, sadly. And in that moment, I'm over there with the mic, and Daphne is on the computer. Me and Daphne started living together that year. So it was like, well, this is the moment to do this, because now we live together. So if we don't have the time, because we are working in this and that to survive, basically, we can still work maybe at night, drinking some tea in the kitchen, like it, we can have this discussion more like in our everyday life. We really defend this idea that the arts are our work, but sadly, in our context, it was very complicated. It is still very complicated. So it was how we can also keep insisting in doing this work, in doing this also activist work in this case, even if it is in our everyday life. It's a little bit how it is all connected for us, because it is an urgency in the end. It is this need, this very important and fierce need to doing activism through performance. And in this case, also a feminist activist. So in that year, we performed this first work that is called Patriarcal Capital es Alianza Criminal, which means patriarchy and capitalism, basically, are a criminal alliance. And we base our work in the thesis of Sibila Federici, The Caliban and the Witch. That was the book that inspired our work. Like Marcela just said at the beginning, our name, LASTESIS, means the thesis. Why we choose this name? Because our main goal is to spread feminist theory, feminist demands, but through performance. It's this idea of making a translation of ideas, like theoretical ideas, also political demands, to body, to the visual, to sound, etc. And that's why we choose this name, like the thesis, because we are like, there's so many theses, like feminist thesis, that we can take and translated it into this stage performance, also in the public space, etc., unconventional ways of that we can have this name and do this work forever. But we still have this idea, like we can do this until we die, because there's so much to say, so much materials, like this theoretical points of view. But also we had this idea in mind, not only because we relate or identified as feminists. It's not only for doing that, but also because we had and still have this idea that we need these points of view to understand reality from a feminist point of view. Because we think that today, many of our social issues that we have in Chile, but also in other countries and more globally, we need actually to understand reality from these other points of view that maybe are not the same that we have learned in schools or in universities. And it's also our way to put these topics, these subjects, on the table, when generally in the curriculums, for example, the educational curriculums in universities and schools, they are not there. So it's a little bit this idea of how can we put this, like make a highlight on this information, on this point of view, on this way to relate between each other, to, it's a little bit that our objective. I'm going to show you a little video of this. It's very short, but so you can have an idea of. ¿Se ve? Sí, bien.
No se puede entender. No se puede entender. No se puede entender la improvisación sin caer, la capacidad, la necesidad de los hombres cristianos, las mujeres dominadas, los hombres cristianos, las mujeres dominadas. Tu propiedad privada. Tu propiedad privada. Mi cuerpo no será más el sostén capitalista. Mi cuerpo no será más el sostén capitalista. No se puede entender. No se puede entender. No se puede entender el capitalismo sin saber que se basa en la esclavitud femenina, laboral, sexual y reproductiva. Femenina, laboral, sexual y reproductiva. Sexual y reproductiva. Sexual y reproductiva. Sexual y reproductiva. sexual y reproductiva.
So, for example, this performance, we've shown it on like more conventional stages, big theaters and stuff like that. It's a very small in techno parties on the streets. Also, we had these little resumes of the performance. For example, this song that also has like its own life by their own, you know. Also, there's some pamphlets. I don't know if you saw it on the videos. Those pamphlets were created during the performance, and then people can take it with them, you know, home. So that way you have like a little piece of the performance. But also, for example, in the video, there's a moment where we are putting these pamphlets on the streets, and that was on the context of the 8th March protest manifestations in Chile, for example. So it was this idea that how we can relate this performance not only with the performance itself, but also that can have these other points of fight, you know, and of activism in different contexts and through like little pieces of the performance. For example, that like banner, you could say, that is Patriarcal Capital, Alianza Criminal, on the 8th March, when we were like putting all these pamphlets on the street in the context of the protest, we were also marching with this, you know, and dressed with our red overalls that were like the wardrobe of the performance. And that also kind of after this performance, became a little bit like a symbol of us, you know. So every time that we had a public appearance, we will appear with this costume, for example. It was very like Clark Kent phenomenon, you know, because it was like when we arrived to the events, it was like no one knows who we are, you know. But once we put this red thing, it was like, oh, hi, you know, like, you're from LASTESIS, can I take a photo and stuff? And it was like Clark Kent, like absolutely, you know. And it was a very nice strategy because it kind of gave us this place of ¿cómo se dice ser anónimo? Be anonymous, you know, a little bit, kind of. Even if people after knew our names, etc. Like if people Google us, they will knew, you do this, and that doesn't matter. But in the public, something changed, you know, and it was like a little way of always keep doing this performance with our collective. Marcela, when I just arrived into Chicago, we were talking about different things. And I told her, like, I don't have a confrontational spirit, you know. I run away from that. I don't like. And it was like, how? Like everyone will assume like that you are like very like, you know, this feminist collective that comes to fight through performance and saying things that people don't want to hear, you know. But in our intimate life, it's like, no, I'm not like that. So it was like a little bit like this idea of the collective has its own identity, you know, that has these colors like the red and the black and etc. You know. But then is another thing. So I think it's very curious a little bit how these aesthetic decisions in the end for us are also political decisions. You know. So this idea of how you're going to tell this story, like for example, the narratives that you're going to choose, how you're going to organize all the elements on stage, you could say, but don't think of stage like a regular theater. Think of stage like any place, you know. For us, it's like that, like everyday life, like the street is a stage, you know. It's a little bit like how we see it. How all those decisions are also political because we are also trying to do it from a feminist point of view. Because we are also trying to find other ways to tell these stories, tell these demands, tell these theories, to express it through colors, through textures, through beats, you know, that try to also be feminist. And also, which is very important of the story of our collective, is the fact that we are a collective. For example, for us, that was also a very feminist thing to do, this way of saying we are a collective of this. If people ask us our names and stuff, we're going to say it's not a secret, yes? But it's not something that we're going to announce, for example. If we are making a public appearance as the collective, is the collective, and that's all. You know? So it's a little bit this idea of how from insisting in collectivity, insisting on collaboration, we are also trying to insist in other ways to relate between each other from a feminist point of view. I'm just going to show you a little images and I will end of other little things. We have, of course, other performances. For example, this one you already saw it. And then our second work on 2019, is from 2020, El violador eres tú, The Rapist is You. That is the performance from where the public performance of A Rapist in Your Past was taking. We already had created this song. We already have created many things of that performance, and then we make an adaptation to the street because we were living a political uprising. That again is completely related to our story and how we relate with the dictatorship, of course, and with the system in our country, how it still responds to that structure. So it was a little bit our idea to how can we from performance also dispute the public sphere, like the street, like having this idea that the public space is not a space that we don't own it. In the end, this is what we're trying to point it out, this idea that there is a struggle to appearing in the public space. There is a struggle to fight in the public space and to fight from a feminist point of view, like to do it from a different perspective, from the mainstream way of activate the political in the public space. So a little bit, that's why we took this decision. This is the stage performance, you can say. But this, for example, then translated when you went to the street into this. And it's based on the same. It's based on the same decisions, It's based on the same artistic process. But if you see it, it looks quite different. But actually, in the core, it's the same. It's the same idea that was trying to express, but from a different strategy. Because on the street, for example, we needed to be shorter. Like 15 minutes, it was too much for us. So it was like, no, we need to do it in 2 minutes. We also needed to look like a wider collective. So it was this idea, okay, we're going to make an open call, like Maria Jose, we're going to make an open call. We're going to ask people to come dress like if you're going to a party, because that way we will look like we are, a collective trying to do this. And we are going to learn these movements, this song. Actually, the first time you can look in that photo, see in the photo, we have a sheet with the lyrics, because even us, we didn't know it yet, because we never had it done on the street, So it was like this idea that we're going to have when you're in church, but we are like in the street doing a feminist performance. Yes, and then it also changes, etc. And then other works that put a focus on the collaborative is, for example, this performance that we did it on 2021. Yes, that is called Resistencia o la reivindicación de un derecho colectivo. That means resistance or the vindication of a collective right. And it's actually the collective right of the right of a life free of violence. Here what we did is that we took other pieces. For example, in the first work, it was Silvia Federici. In the second work, it was Rita Segato. In this work, it was Judith Butler, Paul Preciado, and Maria Lugones that gave this decolonial point of view of this struggle of being who you are and actually having the right to appear in the public space without being a subject of violence. That is what happened with this. In the moment that you appear in the public space, also you are a subject of violences. And we actually have sadly experienced this different institutionalized violence. For example, with the police. The police has put, ¿cómo se dice? Denuncia. Denounce, like legal denounce against us. For example, the government of Chile, the former government, there was a right-wing government, also supported those denouncements against us. Also, there was a drone above our home for more than 1 year, like all the time, So it's this idea of a persecution from the police, a persecution from the government because of this, because of going to the street and just make a performance of 2.5 minutes. That people sometimes see it like very inoffensive, like, yes, it's so pacific, because you don't break anything, you just go and dance and sing, and it's like, no. What we are saying, it is also violence, we are denouncing violence, and with this performance in particular, we are not only denouncing sexual violence, but also sexual political violence. So what we are trying to do was point it to the police, was saying like the police are the rapists. Because in the context of protest, that started happening. Like when people were getting arrested, if you were a woman or a person from the LGBTQIA plus community, generally, you will be subject of sexual violence too. Like it wasn't also that you can get beat and stuff, but also you can get raped and other things. So yes, it was crazy, like this idea of we're going to the street to point out this idea that the police are the rapists, in the context of protest, that they are making us victims of other types of violence in the context of protest. But then it's the police that, came back and make this legal denounce against us. And this through legal channels, persecution against us. Yes. So it's very, right now the court favored us, like we are okay with that. But in one point of view, in one moment, during like 2 years, it was crazy because we could not make any open call, for example. We could not make any open call to make actions on the street. We could not, because we were risking to go to jail. And in that context is that we created this performance. Because this performance, it is a collaborative performance. It is a collective performance that we do it with a workshop. We make an open call, so people come to a workshop, but it isn't our open call to go to the street to do this. It is an open call to come to do this little workshop, this performance workshop, that we're going to create this, that then we are going to make it in the context of theater festivals, like everything, very protected, so that we are not vulnerable again to this police persecution, but also so that the people that come perform with us are not also victims of this, So it was like finding the strategies to still be on the streets through performance, but all the time this idea that we need to find other ways, new strategies, because generally what happens is that when they understand what you're trying to do, they are going to do everything in their power to stop you. So you find another way, you find another way, you find another way. And with that same idea in mind is that we also have been working not only in performances, like on the street or things like this, like collaborative performances, but also publishing books, like Marcela said, doing video performances, that if you go into our channel in YouTube, you can find other performances, everything is there. Some of them have subtitles in English, and also create other instances of dialogue, of conversation, of connecting with people in other places through workshops, for example, sharing our methodology, but also this idea of being able to have interactions with other activists, with other artists, and also with people that has nothing to do with it, but it's just interested, just curious, and just want to come and see what happens, and also learn how they, in their everyday life, relate with feminist struggles, for example, but also how we think that the feminist issues, you could say, are not limited, but are also like this wide, these very diverse topics of struggles and fights in the public, related to the political, related to society, to education, to economic, economy, everything. It's a little bit how, in the end, for us, feminism is a point of view. It's not something that like we learn most of the time. It's just this this fight that is, for example, the fight of women. We think that that's in the past. Like today, it is a collective fight. It is a society's fight also. And it's a society's way to approach also all these topics that sadly connects us globally, and not only in Chile, because now I'm talking about things that happen there, but I'm pretty sure that also people here can relate to many of those struggles. Yes, sorry for the time. I'm very sorry. Thank you for your attention.